everybody, Brad Guigar here with another episode of Webcomics Confidential. And today we're going to talk about Patreon best practices. In other words, what are some of the things that I'm seeing out there that I think make the best use of one's time in trying to promote and grow their Patreon page? As you know, I'm of the opinion that Patreon right now is the number one revenue generator for webcomics. We've moved away, in my opinion, from the advertising model straight into a crowdfunding model. And between Kickstarter and Patreon, those are where the money's being made right now. So let's talk about best practices. Number one. And this is something, I belong to a number of Patreon groups on Facebook and elsewhere, and it's the most often asked question, and it's a sign of the fact that people don't understand Patreon. The question is, how do I get new patrons to my Patreon? And the answer to that question is that you don't. You bring to Patreon an existing audience. You do not use Patreon to grow an audience. And we've talked about this before. It's called discovery. Kickstarter is fantastic at discovery. I've shared before that I think that in my last couple of Kickstarters, a full 30% of the people that participated and became active backers were people who discovered me through Kickstarter. They didn't know me before finding me on Kickstarter. Kickstarter has excellent discovery. Patreon, not so much, although they are getting better, and it's clear that they're trying to mimic the things that Kickstarter did that led to their impressive discovery prowess. They're not there yet. So as of this point, you do not gain backers through Patreon. You must bring an existing audience. And that means that everything that we've talked about here on webcomics.com in terms of building an audience applies. That includes concepts like frequent, consistent, and significant. That includes writing each day's update so that it grabs the first-time reader. All of those things that are crucial to audience buildings. Those are the things that you need to do to build your audience. And then you take that audience to Patreon. Patreon is no place to find patrons. Not yet. Not yet. So as you're working on that, oh, and by the way, does that mean that you shouldn't start a Patreon yet? No. It means that you should have your attitude adjusted so that you don't have unrealistic expectations. But you should absolutely be starting a Patreon right now, even if you're in the beginning stages of building your property. And that's because you're going to need to get used to this. And there's nothing like impressive numbers to convert that on-the-fence patron. And here's what I mean by that. I've been doing Patreon since, I think, late 2014. As of this point, I've got more than 800 exclusive posts. That's an impressive number when you talk to or you're doing promotion to that fence-sitting patron, that as soon as they sign up, they get access to an impressive number of exclusive posts, exclusive content that they can get right now. And there's only one way to build that up, and that is if you start now and do it a day at a time, just like you did your webcomic. It's important for you to be doing this now so that you can build up a large archive of stuff that you can use to convert people down the road. Okay, so absolutely you should be starting a Patreon account right now, although you should have realistic expectations that it's probably not going to get you much, and that is because, again, you do not gain patrons on Patreon, you bring your existing audience. It's up to you to take that audience and convert them, okay? But that doesn't mean not to do it. You should be building that archive right now so you have an impressive number a year from now. Okay, we're talking the long view here. That's a big part of what we're talking about. Now, the next best practice that I see in Patreon, always be looking for what your audience is willing to pay for and make that exclusive content. I don't care what that is. You know I've got very strong positive opinions on not safe for work comics. If that's something that you think you can pull off well, if that's something that you think you can do, you should be considering that, in my opinion. But even outside of that, there's all kinds of things. Each of you has something to offer beyond your comic. Some of you might be really good at doing a process video. You might be good at talking while you're drawing. I can't do that. I've tried it a couple times. I'm horrible at it. I'm in the zone when I'm drawing. I can't talk and draw at the same time. Other people can. Other people need to talk and draw at the same time. Maybe you're interesting while you're drawing. Maybe for you it's a process video. Maybe for you it's a group hangout. Maybe it's a hangout related to the topic of your comic. For example, if you did, I'm using Scott. He does Table Titans, which has a heavy D&D influence. If he were to do a D&D podcast, and I think he is, I could see that as a fantastic exclusive offer for Patreon. That's the other reason that you want to be doing this now, even if you have 0 patrons at $0. You can start to use that to search for what are your patrons, what are your backers willing to pay for. Oh, and by the way, don't get all wound up in this. As long as you give those patrons a heads up, you can change rewards, you can change tiers, you can change all of this. The only mistake to be made there is if you spring it on people without giving them a chance to change their backer level in accordance with what their thoughts are. And by the way, if you lose backers, that's information you can use too. We're always playing the long game here. We are not into the short game at webcomics.com. Losing a backer is not a big deal if you learn from that experience. There's more backers where that one came from. You are not going to get all wound up in one backer. You're playing the long game, okay? Number 2, I know that you can set up a little message that Patreon automatically emails to your backer when they sign up, and that's great. You should do that, absolutely. But when you get a new backer, you go to your member list there, your patron manager, and you get that person's email address. You copy, you paste it over to your email account. I've got something set up in Gmail, and I believe this was an article on webcomics.com. You can check it out. I think it's called Canned Responses. I have a number of canned responses. One of them is welcome to Patreon, and I send them a personal email welcoming them at the level that they've signed up for. Why? Why do I do this in addition to what Patreon sends them? 2 reasons. Number 1, it lets me explain how Patreon works to them in a personal email, and it's like the first or second paragraph. If you cancel your pledge before the end of the month when your card gets charged, I block you. It's nothing personal. It's standard operating procedure. You need to know that going in so you know what the system is. I send that to them in a personal message, and now they've got my email address. I've got their email address. If they have any questions, they can contact me personally. Yeah, I know you can send messages through Patreon. I'm not super thrilled with the interface. I'm not super thrilled with my ability to search old messages. That needs some improvement. But my email account, and I happen to use Gmail, I can go back, put that person's name up in a search, pull up an old email. I can email that person. If they're in a situation where I feel I need to block them, I can send them a personal email address saying, I can send them a personal email message saying, I want to make sure there's no miscommunication. This is what's going to happen. This is why. If I'm arriving at this conclusion incorrect, please let me know. That's happened a couple times where somebody says, oh no, this thing happened or that thing happened, or maybe they had an extenuating circumstance. I'd much rather open that line of communication rather than just block somebody indiscriminately and have them be angry at me and lose the ability of gaining that person as a supporter in the future. All right? So I always email new patrons personally. It opens up a line of communication that I don't have as high quality in Patreon itself. Number three, update frequently. I make no bones about it. For the last since January of 2016 and all the way through up until now and going into the future, my goal, and I've met that goal just about every month or came darn close to doing it. My goal is one exclusive post per day, every day of the month. Now, does that mean I'm posting every day? No. Does that mean that sometimes I post 2 posts in a day or 3? Absolutely. But it averages out to 1 post for every day of the month, exclusive content. Why? Because it works. And it goes back to that earlier conversation we had at Webcomics Confidential where I said people want stuff for their money. If they're signing up at different levels, the higher those levels go, the more exclusive content they should get. That's what they're signing up for. If you're looking at this as a charity or a tip jar, you got your head screwed on wrong. You need to readjust, get your head screwed on straight, and realize that Patreon is a subscription service. No ifs, ands, or buts. And the sooner you readjust that attitude, the more you can start to look at this and make correct decisions. If you're out there thanking people for their charity and their generosity and stuff like that, you're going about it all wrong. If you're saying this is what you get for your money, now you're thinking. Okay? So update frequently. The more updates, the more reason people have to continue to support you, the sooner you're going to have that big number you can promote down the road. And don't forget, every time you update, you run out to social media and you say, hey, I just updated again. That is promotion. Okay? And we are always trying to find that good balance among the 3 C's, right? Content, commercial, I'm blanking on the 3rd C. Oh, yeah. Curation. The 3 C's, comment, commercial, and curation. We're always trying to find a good balance among those 3. However, that don't let that stop you from promoting every one of those exclusive Patreon posts. It just means you might have to do a little bit more curation and a little bit more content, but that commercial is crucial. The 4th C, crucial. That's crucial to helping grow your Patreon page. All right. So update frequently, and that means that you're promoting frequently. Remember, don't get all wound up about social media. The people that are following you on social media do not get every message you send out. You feel from your side, you feel like you're saying the same thing every day and people are getting tired of your voice. They're only hearing about 30-40% of what you're putting out there. And that actually works in your favor. Don't get upset that they're not hearing every post. That's the cry of the first-time Facebook promoter who really doesn't understand promotion, online promotion particularly. You get all wound up in Facebook's algorithms and they don't hear me and I'm posting, they're not seeing. What that does, by the way, there's a little tangent. You're throwing it in for free. What that does is it forces you to write good promotion, because the promotion that Facebook does pick up and carry is the promotion that gets traction because people are paying attention to it. They're responding to it. They're commenting. They're liking. They're sharing. The promotion that you post on Facebook that doesn't get any traction didn't get traction because it sucked. And you should be learning from that. Okay? So, doesn't mean that you can't put it out there. Doesn't mean that I don't put out a kind of standard operating procedure. Here's the next Patreon post. But if your Facebook posts aren't getting traction, it's not Facebook's fault. It's yours. Do better. Don't waste all your time like all these freaking wannabes that are out there. The Patreon, boo-hoo, the algorithm. Do better promotion. It'll get carried. God, I'm getting grumpy over here. I spent 5 days in this hotel room. I'm getting grumpy. What can I tell you? So yeah, update frequently, and that means you're promoting frequently. And here's my last thoughts on Patreon: cross promotion. Everything that's old is new again. This is stuff we did back in the day before I had all this gray in my beard. Back then, we called it web rings. And you'd put a little thing at the bottom of your site. And when they were done reading your comic, they could click and read the next guy's comic. That was cross promotion. And it would cross promotion. Those of you who are old geezers like me remember the Keen Spot box that they put in, the promo box. Everybody had to run on their site. When it was your turn on the box, you got a flood of new traffic. It was fantastic. You look forward to it like Christmas. It came 2 or 3, 4 times a year. It was fantastic. It was cross promotion. And hardly anybody is doing it on Patreon. However, those of us who are doing it are finding great amounts of positive energy and results from it. I just did one with Javis Ray. He does a non-safe for work a version of his comic as well. It was a perfect fit, his audience and my audience. We did a cross promotion. He was able to release some of my exclusive content. I was able to release some of his exclusive content to my backers. We made it, again, his exclusive content. I made it my exclusive content to my backers. And same thing. I gave him exclusive content. Then he released it exclusively to his backers. Everybody got exclusive stuff that they weren't expecting that month. The backers got a bonus. Who doesn't love a bonus? At the same time, they got exposed to new stuff. You know what happened? Both of us got a big bump in backers that month. And I haven't checked in lately, but that happened it happened last month. We're all the way into next month, but the last I checked, we both retained a great amount of that bump. In other words, they came, they liked what they saw, and they stuck around. That's the best case scenario. Even if they didn't, even if they stayed for a month, let their payment process, and then jumped out. My experience has been that people are cyclical on Patreon. They'll jump in for a month, they'll jump out. I got to go back and see if I can find a way to do the statistics on this. But I can tell you just on anecdotal evidence, when I see people leave, I never get upset because I know in a couple months I'm going to see that name and they're going to be back again. And what happens is people cycle through. It's a way for them to moderate the expense. In other words, my most popular level is a $10 level. Well, there are some people that don't want to pay $10 a month, but they figured out that if they're a member this month and they cancel next month, and then they reapply on the third month, that they get access to all that stuff. If they're willing to wait for it, they can go back and binge all the stuff that they missed. And as long they know from me, because I email them personally, they know from me that as long as they let their card process at the end of the month, they can do this all year long. And instead of getting $120 a year out of a $10 level, I get maybe $60. Who cares? That's way more money than I was making off of individual people when I was under the ad level. Even if I extrapolate that and let one backer equal, maybe 100 backers, I'm still doing better. Even if they're throttling back to half of what a full year would cost, I'm still doing better. So I don't get angry at people that leave my Patreon as long as the rules are put out clearly. And again, that goes back to that email. The rules are put out clearly. You come in, you let that card process at the end of the month. We got no problems. You want to leave the following month after that card processed? Go. My job is to do the kind of content that's going to bring you back in another month. That's my job. That's what I see. I don't sit around and bemoan somebody who leaves my Patreon after their card processes. And by the way, if they do, I block them. They can only do that to me once. What's the problem there? It's a very graceful solution. Bing, they're done. We play the long game here at webcomics.com. There's more readers where that came from. I don't need that one guy. Neither do you. Stop worrying about that one patron and look at the long game. What are you doing for all of your patrons that you can possibly get? What are you doing over the course of the year? Not this month, not next month, not this season, over the course of the year. Play the long game. You're going to find that it works a lot better for you. And as always, keep those updates coming. The more updates you put out, you've got more archive and you've got more opportunities to experiment and see what are your backers willing to pay for, and that's crucial information for Patreon. So this is Brad Guigar. Hit me up in the comments on webcomics.com. Let me know what you think. And if you've got other questions, if you've got other topics that you'd like me to cover, by all means, hit that contact button at the top of the site and drop me an email. Let me know what your thoughts are, what topics I can talk about later. This is Brad Guigar once again for webcomics.com, and we'll see you next time.